Hey there! Today I want to talk to you about playing melodically and how you can either start to learn how to improvise or how you can improve your improvisation through the use of melodic development, specifically using the concept of motifs. I want to read you a definition of motifs from a book that I love. Actually, from a couple of books. First one is called How to Improvise by Hal Crook. And this is a detailed breakdown and analysis of all the different important areas of improvisation, specifically pertaining to jazz, but this doesn't only pertain to jazz. This pertains to any type of music that you would be improvising over. So this book is really great, but specifically I'd like to read you his definition of a motif or motif soloing. A motif is a small thematic unit of melody, roughly between 2 and 8 notes, consisting of a single idea or musical thought, similar to a short sentence in language, generally not longer than 2 bars, unless written in cut time. A motif's ending is determined by a brief or sustained period of rest or inactivity, which defines the idea and allows time for its effect to be realized. The total length of a motif often includes this period of inactivity which immediately follows it. So essentially what he's saying is that a motif is a small musical idea. This is something that you can define by using a specific rhythm, a specific set of notes, or a combination of those things. And really what defines it is that you're framing it with silence or rest. Doesn't have to be really long rests, but really the rest at the end is how he describes it, is that the inactivity at the end allows time for the effect of what you play to be realized. Now that sounds a bit fancy, but basically what you're doing is you're playing a small idea, like a short sentence in language, and then you're giving people a moment, you're giving the listener a moment, and also your own inner ear a moment to process that statement. This would contrast with playing a constant stream of notes, like playing a super long phrase all in 16th notes or triplets or eighth notes, where you're not allowing space. And there are times in music where you want to do something like that, play a very long phrase. But for the purposes of playing melodically, and especially for connecting with an audience, if you keep the ideas small, you can allow your listeners to understand what you're going for, and you can also help your own development of your solo by giving yourself room to develop the concept. I want to read one more definition, and this is from an older book. This is an old version of the Harvard Dictionary of Music, which was published in 1945. I have no idea where I got this, but I really enjoy this book because it has some really interesting definitions. Okay, motif. According to the Harvard Dictionary of Music, circa 1945, a motif is the briefest, intelligible, and self-contained fragment of a musical theme or subject. As few as 2 notes may constitute a motive, or motif, if they are sufficiently characteristic. And this is a part that I really love here. The motives or motifs are the very bricks or germinating cells of a composition. And when we're talking about improvisation, to me, in my concept, improvisation is the same as composition, except that composition is improvisation slowed down, making deliberate choices about what those notes are. Improvisation is composition sped up. So you don't have time to really deliberate about every decision for a long time. You are in the moment. You need to come up with something to say off the top of your head. And that's why improvisation is a very beautiful art form that takes a lot of skill in order to do properly and to do well. And so building your improvisations out of these small segments and developing them is a really fantastic way to add some interest to your solos and to really bring in the listener and bring in the band if you're playing with a band. Because if you play a small idea and then you listen, you might hear people in the band, if they're good listeners also, you might hear them responding to you and playing something interesting that will inspire the next development of your motif or idea. So anyway, I love the idea of these motives or motifs being the germinating cells, or like the building blocks of a composition, and I would extend that to also they're the building blocks of an improvisation. So how do you apply this concept? That's what I want to show you. So I'm going to jump to a little bit of a closer shot of my guitar and talk you through some of the ways that I think about this. So where I'm going to begin here is with the B minor pentatonic scale, just first position, because this is easy. It's something that everybody seems to know. I want to just demonstrate in the simplest way possible how you could use a motif. So as I stated in the definition, a motif is a small musical idea akin to a short sentence in language that can be from 2 to 8 notes. Frankly, I don't limit it to 8 notes, but that was what the definition in the Hal Crook book said, but at least a minimum of 2 notes. The reason that you wouldn't necessarily call one note a motif is because it has no movement, it has no motion to it. Because if I just play one note ideas, I mean, you can do that, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a motif. So we're going to begin at the minimum requirement by the definition, which is a 2-note motif. So starting here, I'm just going to play a rhythm on starting on the B. I'm going to demonstrate a motif and move it through the scale so that you can get an idea of what this might sound like in a very simple form. So I'm going to count it in 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So notice how I grouped each of the 2-note ideas, giving a little bit of space in between. So I was playing 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4. This is a very simple idea, but if you notice when you listen to it, it does have a continuity. I'm playing the exact same rhythm for each of these ideas, each of these for this motif, and I'm playing the exact same melodic contour. So melodically, you could say that each of these little motifs is ascending. See, I'm ascending. I'm starting on a lower note and moving to a higher note. So that's one of the considerations when you're thinking about a motif. You have the rhythm of the motif, then you have the melodic direction. And those are also the elements that you can manipulate in order to change a motif as you develop it in an improvisation. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that same basic motif and I'm going to flip it on its head a little bit by just reversing the melodic direction of every other piece of the phrase. So I'm going to start counting in 3, 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1. Now I just resolved to the B because my ear wanted to hear that resolution. But notice how I began here, ascending. While maintaining the same rhythm for the next phrase, I switched the melodic direction. So now I'm moving down or descending. And then maintaining the same rhythm, I switched it back to an ascending, and then to a descending, and then resolved. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to slightly develop the rhythm. Instead of changing the melodic contour, I'm going to keep the melodic direction the same and just slightly develop the rhythm, which is another basic element that you can manipulate in order to change the sound of the phrase and really the effect that you're going to have when you play a phrase. So 3, 4, 1 and 2, 3. 3. So in as simple of terms as possible, basically I just played my first phrase, and then what I did is I just waited slightly longer to play my second phrase, which I'm maintaining the same melodic contour, moving ascending. Then I did the same thing again on the next two strings. So these are a couple of primary ways that you can develop melodic phrases. One being changing the melodic contour or changing the rhythm. I'm going to show you a little more of a developed idea based on these same notes. So 3, 4, 1, and 2, 3, and 4. So you'll notice that I added some notes into the middle of the phrase to expand that motif, and the motif ended up being longer, incorporating both the notes I was playing on the second string and the third string. There is no right or wrong way to do this, and basically, as you play with this idea, you can be as creative as you want. You can change all the different elements and see what kind of things that you like to do. In my solos, I tend to like to start with a basic motif or idea because it gives me somewhere to develop to, rather than starting a solo by playing a lot of notes, which would leave, to me, seemingly less options for the rest of the solo, especially if I'm playing a solo for extended period of time, like between 1 and 3 minutes long, which happens especially on certain types of gigs. But I'm going to give you an example of something that I might use in an improvisation of mine, just so you can see that a way that I would actually use this concept. And I'm not going to stay in the position of this B minor pentatonic because I think hopefully you understand the idea and you can play around with the concept over B minor pentatonic yourself. But I'm just going to give you an example of how I would use this concept. And I'm going to come back to this concept in future lessons on improvisation, just because I think it's a very important concept, and there's a lot of different ways you can use motifs to develop ideas and create really interesting solos. So here we go. 3, 4, 1. I'm going to give you one more example. This time I'm going to play B major. 1, 2, 3, 4. You might notice that the last phrase I played in that was not exactly like the other phrases. It's quite a bit different. But that is a tendency that I have in my playing, and I hear other players do it too, where the last of a set of, say, 4 motifs or phrases tends to be a little more active, and therefore giving the full phrase, the overarching larger phrase made up of these motifs, in this case 4 individual smaller phrases making up a larger idea, gives them some conclusion and some sense of direction. I'm going to do one more for you, and I'm going to try to do a longer improvisation with one single motif that I'm developing throughout. So we'll see how this goes. 3, 4, 1. So to conclude, I just want to recap a couple of the concepts that hopefully you can bring into your own playing and start using in order to develop improvisations, whether you're really experienced with improvisation or this is your first journey into the world of improvisation. This concept really is applicable to any level of playing. So to recap, the idea is that a motif is a small musical phrase made up of 2 to 8 notes-ish. It's very loose, length of definition there, but basically the thing that really binds it together is a cohesive rhythmic concept and melodic concept that you can invert, you can change the melodic contour while keeping the rhythm the same, you can change the rhythm while keeping the melodic contour the same, and you can develop it into a full phrase or full what you'd think of as maybe a musical paragraph. If you're speaking in short musical sentences, you're building up to larger structures, and if you take the analogy of written language further, small sentences build up to paragraphs, and then paragraphs build up to a full story. And really, the idea of soloing is a way for you to tell a story to the listener. It's not about what techniques you know. It's not about how fast you can play. Those are great things. Techniques are great and speed is great. But really, the players that have a communicative melodic approach are really the types of players that draw an audience in, and also equally as important, maybe even more importantly, draw in the musicians that they're interacting with and playing with, and gives the musicians a chance to interplay and to bounce ideas back and forth. You may play a motif. If you're performing with a band and you're improvising, you may play a motif, and in the space after, as you're allowing the effect to be realized by the band, you may hear a rhythm from, let's say, the bass player, the drummer. And that rhythm may be a response to what you played if they're really listening. And then you can then be inspired by their idea and respond to what they said. And now you're engaged in a musical conversation with the people you're playing with. And that is a really great and powerful way to increase the level of connection between musicians and audience. So I hope you found this useful. I'm hoping that you can apply that concept to your own playing, and I'm going to be doing one lesson per month specifically on concepts surrounding improvisation. So if you have any questions relating to motifs or other aspects of improvisation, please leave me a comment and I will respond to you and try to take your perspective into consideration and try to answer your question in a future lesson. So I hope you have a great week. Thanks. Bye.